I'm stoked today. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. I am stoked today. I'm stoked! Why? Because the Grammy nominations just came in and I got nominated for my first ever Grammy. An album that I did with Jon Batiste. It's Cory, Wong, and Jon Batiste, Meditations. Very different from most of the music that I do, and it is even in the Best New Age Album category. Never thought that I'd say I'm a New Age artist, but I'll take it. And if any of you happen to be voting Grammy members, I mean, come on, holler at your boy, as they, used to say in like 2008 or whatever. Come at me with it. Speaking of Grammys, today's guest, Jacob Collier, was just nominated for Album of the Year for Jesse Volume 3. He's been working on a 4-part series, 4 albums. This album that he just put out is my absolute favorite. He's got that in-your-face funk, rhythmic thing, and his name is now becoming synonymous with music in general. He's starting to become a more ubiquitous character in the sphere of pop culture even, which is amazing because he's such a talented musician. To me, Jacob is a legend in the making. He is an incredible musician and truly an ambassador for music with a capital M. He's just an ambassador for what music is in the world. And it's so fun to see not only being amazing at what he does, but you can tell he's just so excited and having so much fun doing what he does and spreading that knowledge, spreading the joy of music to others around him. So this was really fun because Jacob and I have actually never met in person, but we have so many mutual friends and it's just been a long time coming. So hopefully this is the first of many encounters that we have together. Thanks for joining us. Hey, I got no shame. Vote for him, vote for me. If you're in the Grammy voting world, I'll take anything I can get. I'm shameless. Come at me with this new age. Look out Enya, look out Yanni, look out Pat Metheny. I'm looking to get, it is a dream for every young musician. I don't care. It's one thing to say, oh, award shows aren't my thing. Okay, whatever. They aren't your thing until you get nominated or you win one. Then it's like, you know what? That's pretty cool. And for whatever reason, it does just matter to the public and to the professional world. It just gives you some other sense of, I don't know, legitimacy, whatever. Do Jacob or I actually need that? I don't know. I mean, certainly him, no, and he's already won a couple Grammys. So, I don't know. I'm giving this disclaimer because there's some sense of insecurity in me, but whatever, screw it. Vote for us. Ha! Thanks for hanging. Here's my interview with Jacob. This season of the Wong Notes podcast is sponsored by Neural DSP. All Wong Notes listeners get 30% off with the voucher code WONG. Neural DSP creates industry-leading guitar and bass plugins. The range includes signature plugins from some of the best modern guitarists, such as Cory Wong, Plini, Adam Nolly Getgood, and Tosin Abasi. The archetype Cory Wong gives you everything from crystal clear tones to edge of breakup blues tones, whereas the 14-amp series delivers all the crushing modern metal tones you could possibly need. And that Nameless is my favorite Marshall amp ever. There's a plugin here for every type of player, and you can get a 14-day free trial for every single one of them without even entering your credit card details. Find me another company doing that. Once you've found the ones you like, you get that 30% off your purchase by entering the code WONG at checkout.
Dude, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm really good. I'm excited to finally hang out.
I know. It's been a long time coming. We have so many mutual friends, and everybody's always like, oh, you know Jacob, right? You guys have worked together and stuff. I'm like, no, we haven't yet.
We haven't actually met.
I
Crazily.
know.
Yeah, crazy.
I was just working on a track with Kimbra, who I know you work with. And she's like,
yeah. I spoke to her just yesterday, actually. She's amazing.
She's incredible. We were working on a tune, writing a tune together. She's like, have you worked with Jacob yet? Your guys' energy in the studio is so similar, and your flow is like, we need to make that happen. I was like, all right.
I believe it. That's amazing. Yeah, Kimbra is an astonishing force of nature.
I know. I've been such a huge fan of hers since the Vows album. And Golden Echo. I mean, she's insane. She's so good.
Golden Echo, I think that's my number one from Kimbra. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Such interesting stuff in the bass department on that album? Because I think it was
Yeah.
Thundercat on most of it.
It was Thundercat, yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I love that bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Killer.
Well, I first got hip to you from, I think it was either a Flintstones or an Isn't She Lovely arrangement that you did.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was just going to be, oh my gosh, we have this new gift to the world that's this vocal arranger guy. And then you've developed your thing so much in the last several years. And I must say, you were ahead of your time, because the way that you outlined your videos with you in separate screens is now basically what everybody's having to do in 2020
Right.
with the collaborations.
I've noticed that. It's a funny thing. I was in this room making music 10 years ago with my sister's iPad 2, which I took from her against her will,
Wow.
and filmed all these different instruments on, and that whole era for me was super important. But the tech wasn't really there yet, and I remember trying to do split screen videos in iMovie. And at that time, I think you can do it now, but at that time you couldn't do it at all. And so I actually managed to get my hands on a cut of Final Cut Express, which is a bit of a gnarly program to use.
Yeah.
And I've been on Logic for about 6 years. I got Logic when I was 11. So the whole concept of layering and visualizing those layers, mixing those layers together, the thing was quite new, but I was determined to make it work, because I had this idea in my mind that you'd be able to look around the music and see all the different elements of the music and follow them along, and sort of and deep dive visually as well as audially, and that to me was appealing.
You clearly have the auditory sensitivity of extreme depths, but you bring up visual things. Do you see music go by? Do you visualize emotion? Do you visualize landscapes when you're writing and playing music?
I often think about visual stuff. I wouldn't say I particularly see in a sort of synesthesia kind of vibe, like it's a green D and it's an A flat, which is purple, whatever. But I've always been super interested in, especially symmetry, actually, just things that are organized and make sense and have balance and are sort of self-contained entities within form and shape, and things that have arcs and tell stories with shapes and stuff. So I love that world. To me, I guess, there's so many different ways you can see and talk about music. And so I didn't necessarily feel from sort of childhood that there was one particular way that was right and wrong, to see the music as it was going by. But to me, I think it was always a challenge with the video thing to get it to not be distracting, because there was, so much of the visual part of the musical experience nowadays is so important, but it's easy, especially with music that's really multiple layered and multifaceted and really rich and dense and stuff, just to have the visual take over completely. And that was my challenge from that time about 10 years ago. It's like, how do I get this to be not just in the way of the music, but to be a part of the expression?
That's interesting you say that. I think that is really true right now. The way that so many people absorb music is on YouTube or Instagram or some other thing where they're seeing somebody do the thing. And that definitely has a lot to do with how we interact with the music that's being presented.
I mean, I completely agree. I first got hip to you through all the Wolf Boys, who I love so dearly. And I would say that part of that magic and part of the magic of that collective and that brand and that feeling is almost as much visual as it is audio, Totally. And it feels so kind of contained and crackly and sort of compressed and old-fashioned, but super hip and current and grainy. And when I think of Vulfpeck and the sound, it's that visual for me,
Yeah.
And I just think it's so interesting how that has kind of taken over the world, and how, just how important the style, the nuance, the kind of concept of the music is visual almost, and it feels like this kind of conglomerate sensation that you're buying into, whether you're listening or watching or at a gig or using the Vulf compressor, whatever, you know what I mean? It's this kind of entity. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fun. And that's so much a part of Jack's vision for the thing. I mean, he partially because of his wanting to keep things very simplistic and minimal. And so basically all of the Vulfpeck videos are recorded on an iPhone on this app called 8mm. And there's these different filters. And the video that you get, the filter is baked into the whole thing.
No kidding.
So
wow, that's
it's
amazing.
just what you get. And, then it was like, okay, let's use a steady cam. And even the visual of the Fearless Flyers, our side project, he was very much, let's put 3 guitars on stands and let's do, bass, baritone, and regular, whatever you want to call that, guitar, and then a drummer. So it's kind of the 3 ranges of guitar. So the visual thing definitely is something that Jack, as a band leader, producer, is always very aware of. And it's fun to be a part of. I've learned a lot from working with him.
I can absolutely imagine. And so how specific is he about how he wants things to be as the leader of that group? Is he the kind of guy who says, okay, it's this exact way, do what I say and let fit into my structure? Or is he open and sort of conversational about how the thing feels and how the group can decide what the eventual result is going to feel like and be?
He'll normally have a couple ideas and bring them to the table, and we'll start playing. And the thing that's really cool about him is he's got this producer thing where he knows everybody in the band's strengths, and he'll try to do some just slow pitch to each person. So it's like, all right, Dart crushes this thing. Let's give Joe this. All right, Cory's rhythm guitar thing is this. Let's set him up for success in this. And his drumming style versus Theo's drumming style, or Woody's composition style, or the way that he plays keys. So it's cool to see him have the vision for something, but also try to tee everybody up to win within the situation, which is really fun.
That's cool. That's really cool.
It's fun. There's a lot of collaboration in the sessions and in the thing, because we normally will go in not knowing what we're going to do. Jack will start playing something, or sometimes he'll send a little demo, and then we just kind of work out the A section, work out the B section, find a form, do maybe 2 or 3 takes, and we're done. And that's like the thing. But our approach also, I wanted to ask you about this, because Jack's approach and our approach historically has been very minimalist, where he also, we might have done 3 takes, but at the end of it, we'll just get a jump drive that has only take 2, and we'll airdrop the video from the iPhone to the computer. So in one folder, it's the video for the take, and then it's literally just the tracks. And normally it's less than 10 tracks for each song. It's DI guitar, DI bass, 2 mics on the drums, DI whirly, maybe an SM57 on the piano or something. He very much wants as little work to do as, or actually in some ways it's more work, because you have to figure out how to make the thing happen with a few amount of tracks. From watching some of your session breakdowns, you're like the opposite. You're maxing out Logic's, I can see you on the phone in Cupertino right now yelling at Apple for not giving you enough tracks to do your
right. No, I am most definitely a maximalist. I've always embraced that. I think part of that is a symptom of working alone for my whole life, And I say working alone for my whole life, I've recently done so much collaboration, but I think that my kind of space and the world that I built as a teenager, or as a boy, literally in this chair, in this room, was one where I would play and I would lay my materials out as I was conceiving them and thinking them, and everything would be welcome in the canvas. And so I'd pour into Logic all of these ideas, and then the challenge would be, okay, how do I get this to make some kind of sense if I want to make sense? And sometimes I don't. But if I do, then I think it's always important for me, and it always has been important, to let everything sort of come out at first before I decide what that process is and what it's going to be. And so in some ways, the difference between the approaches comes almost about when you give the freedom in the process. Because I think for me, there's a certain amount of sort of concentration discipline that comes with all of the kind of careful sculpting and the decision making that comes from all those raw materials after they've been recorded. But I guess a valid way of doing it is also to have all of those raw materials going around in your head all day long, and then decide what you want to do with them, and then have that decision making come out as you record, as you lay those foundations down, and that result is born. And to be honest, I love looking at it from both of those different approaches. And I think, one of the things about working with other people, which I'm learning now actually in my sort of life and career, which is really joyful actually, is that giving somebody this infinite space to work with doesn't always help. It depends on the person. So sometimes people just love and relish this unlimited space, this unlimited canvas, and other people like being very precise, or being given very precise instructions, which is one of the reasons I was so interested to hear, what you guys, what your process looked like within that. But I think for me, the interesting thing is thinking, well, if you're working with infinity, which in some ways you always are when you sit down to create something, to a point, it's like, what do you choose to do with that, and how you choose to work with that, I think is telling of who you are and how you are, and also what kind of music you love. I think that one of the really interesting things for me has been talking to musicians and collaborators who have ingested a lot of the same music that I have ingested throughout their lives as children, as teenagers, but then it alchemizes and comes out in a completely different way from me, which I think is so cool and so interesting. So, you know, me and, say, for example, Daniel Caesar both really love Stevie Wonder, but what Daniel hears in Stevie and what comes out of Stevie in Daniel is so different from what comes out of Stevie in me. And I love that. I love that it's possible to kind of sponge in this world of music. And obviously now you can listen to so much music, to sponge in all these forces. And then when you turn the tap on, and how you turn the tap on, that's new every time, and it's fresh every time. But each person has their own kind of dialect of what has made sense to them in what they've heard and what resonates with them. And I think that's what keeps music as a scene so fresh.
I love that approach. When you were growing up playing everything yourself, do you feel like that was an advantage or a disadvantage to what you're doing now, where you're starting to collaborate more? Or do you feel like it was I guess the two parts of that are, did you feel like it gave you the amount of space you needed to figure out your thing? Or do you feel like you missed out on how to communicate with a band member, or like, this is the only drummer in my town, so we had to figure out how to make it work?
Right. It's an interesting question. I mean, one thing I'll say is I did a lot of jamming with friends and people and musicians and family members and stuff throughout my sort of musical upbringing. Yeah. But that was happening sort of in tandem, like as a tangent to this world that I was building on my own. And so I think the cool thing was, you know, going into school and thinking, you know, okay, we've got a guitarist, a bass player, and drummer and a keys player. Okay, like let's get as filthy as possible with getting this band to feel good, to work it, to write music for it and with it. And, you know, I had these three friends, Misha and Matt and Umar, and we used to sit and every Monday night we'd write and jam and create stuff together. It was a super cool time. And I was basically the drummer in the band, weirdly enough. That was like my thing. But I'd sort of wander around the room, as all of us did really, and have a go at all the instruments. And it was an interesting experiment there to be aware of how the music felt from all these different angles. And all those perspectives for me were educational. And when I came into this space to make music, I figured, well, okay, I kind of know how it feels to be the bass player. I kind of know how it feels to be the drummer. Kind of know how it feels to be the singer or the guitarist. I mean, to a point, I'm not really a guitarist. I think for me that the interesting thing was examining the perspectives of music from this space, from my solo space. And obviously when you listen to music, you can listen to it from all these different perspectives too. You know, what's the harmony doing? What's the melody doing? What's the groove doing? And why does the pocket feel deeper here than it does here? Why is opening the hi-hat on the offbeats make it feel like you want to stomp your feet? And why does delaying the offbeats make it feel like it's lilting and it feel like it has a weird pocket? And why does that work in samba but not work in techno? You know, all these kinds of experiments. I used to take those things from my listening space, and sometimes that was a social listening space, and I take that into this room, sit down with the materials in Logic and start nudging them around and figuring out what made me feel cool and what was funky and what wasn't funky. And that process for me was really just it was specific to my world. You know, I don't think it necessarily would have worked for everybody. And I think I've definitely realized, especially in the last couple of years, touring with other musicians, that the kind of infinite solo space makes sense for some things and not for others. And so a real challenge for me was just letting go of the awareness of all the perspectives live, because I can't just jam if I'm thinking about what the bass is doing to the drums and I'm not playing the bass or the drums. You know, it's a bit paralyzing. So for me, I think, you know, it's been fun and difficult, but really important, I think, at this point in my life, just to kind of divorce myself from all of that awareness and having control over those different elements and sort of let them go and see where things fall. And that's something really, really special. And it's something that honestly, strangely, I'm discovering quite late in my kind of creation process.
I can imagine also for you, as somebody who layers so much of your own vocals, when you're working with other singers, I have friends with perfect pitch that are always like, oh, okay, are we singing flat today? All right, well, we're singing flat today. And, you know, they have to adjust their mind and almost not get bitter about it, because you could nitpick so much in so many situations as somebody who knows how to play bass, as somebody who knows how to, it's like, no, that harmony line, it's not a major scale. It's pentatonic, you know, or whatever. I can imagine that being somewhat difficult, but the art of being able to let go is...
I think, you know, it's also the art of being able to take what you get, and this is both in a live improvising scenario and also in a stop time composition scenario or a collaboratory scenario, but being able to take what you get and roll with it. And one of the things I've loved doing, say for example, there's a note which is flat. It's like that note is welcome in harmony. Like you can harmonize a note which is flat or sharp or bendy or growly or whatever that's not perfectly in tune, and that's welcome, and you can roll with it. And I think for me, on the one hand, there's the acceptance that comes with something not being the way that you imagine it, which is wonderful, and on the other side, there's the stretching of the awareness to include it. So it might be like, okay, I've got a groove that goes right? That sounds late to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Way late.
And so,
snare.
okay, yeah, you can think like, all right, I'm going to let that be late. Like, I get it, it's late. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to stop being aware of it altogether. I'm just going to tune it out. That's one approach. Or there's the approach that says, okay, so is that late from that beat, or is it early from that beat? And so which gravity is it pertaining to, and how can I enjoy that? And then there's the thing, well, is it just in its own precise position, whatever. And so how grid-based your understanding is it's a case-by-case basis thing, I guess, for me. But obviously live, playing music live, I'm not about to stop the band and say, whoa,
yeah.
why is this note 14 cents flat or 17 cents sharp and stuff like that, even though my brain is giving me those numbers sometimes, because I know that the kind of gesture and the degree of the gesture is in a different place from say in the recording environment. But you mentioned working with singers. I think the interesting thing that's blown my mind recently is how in tune is different depending on where you live and what you listen to. Say for example, a seventh degree of a scale to us is quite particular. Exactly where it's placed. You go that makes sense to us. But if you wander east, then it doesn't take that many thousands of kilometers to get to the point where is the correct seventh, right? A really flat seventh. Yeah. And weirdly, like if you sing a note in a cathedral or you explore the harmonic series and you've got all the overtones available, then the seventh overtone is super flat. And so I think I've loved the idea of thinking that it's not just that one particular awareness only works for one particular set of things, like perfect pitch people saying, oh, that's not a note and that's too sharp or that's too flat.
Yeah.
It's not just that. It's also realizing that even what is flat and sharp is completely, it's something that's open to interpretation, and you can bend with that, and you can roll with that, and you can enjoy being stretched with that. That's interesting to me.
I run into that exact thing as a rhythm guitar guy.
Oh, I bet.
Rhythm guitar is where I love to just be at home. That's like my thing, I guess. The guitar in general is just kind of not in tune. Even when it's in tune, it's not really in tune. And then when you put your fingers on frets, it's kind of, like this one's pressing a little hard, so it's a little sharp.
Sharp, yeah.
And it gets this thing. And then my role in a band scenario, normally I'm listening to lock in with the bass player, lock my subdivision in with the hi-hat, and then the big beats on the kicks and the snares, and kind of navigate where to place myself and kind of compromise my own, okay, I see, because I'm somebody who kind of sees the grid go by. I'm very visual with the grid and how I feel time. That helps me to get it locked in. And maybe that's from drumline days or something.
Interesting. Oh, yeah, cool. Makes sense.
For me, I'm always negotiating in my head the intonation of my guitar. I normally let that, I don't know, it's like I can tell it's kind of out of tune, but I like it. It's fine.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's a vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way that a certain band locks together, the way that the rhythms lock with the drums, that kind of defines the sound of a band. And I've enjoyed gathering that and kind of honing that into the way the groove feels with Vulfpeck versus my own project, or Fearless Flyers when Nate Smith is drumming. It's paying attention to different things. All of a sudden it's like, okay, this is the sound of the groove of the band. It's not just the members and everything, but it's also where everybody's feeling and placing and compromising the time and the subdivision.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that all that stuff is magical. So would you say that in your mind there's a sort of hierarchy between all the different elements of music that you have control over. And also you don't have control over every ingredient, but one of those is where you place time. One of those is where you place tuning. And one of those is where you, like I suppose where you place ad libs, like where you'll stretch out and fill or whatever. Do you feel like that hierarchy is set and universal in general, or do you feel like that changes depending on who you're playing with?
Definitely changes depending on who I'm playing with, because especially somebody in the rhythmic world, I am seeing where everybody else, I kind of think of two realms within that. Who's playing parts or like looping patterns, and who's kind of the floater. If there's too much floating going around, I'm just going to lock into a pattern and I'm going to try to anchor the thing. And I'm going to play in a way that's like cueing to where somebody might be floating to kind of pull it in to have some sense of grounding.
Yeah.
But if it's kind of a bunch of pattern-based things, or even I find myself when I'm writing in Logic and I just have a loop up that's like a 2-bar loop, I will end up playing more ad-libby than when I'm playing with a drummer, because the drummer is automatically going to add in maybe instead
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to find where they're filling the spaces, and I'm going to stay out of that. Or I'll kind of feel like, oh, are they always doing a 1 and 2 and thing? Should I accent that? Or maybe I do the 3 and 4 and, or I go the 1 and a 2 and a, so there's different ways. So, so the rhythm can feel like it's cascading between the parts, or it can feel like it's locking between the parts. It definitely changes band to band, and also just what my role in the band is.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I love how like open-minded you are about that, and also just how consciously aware you are of kind of being as effective and helpful to others as possible. And I think you really feel that listening to you play. It's this sense you get that you're part of all the different band members' vocabulary. You're a drummer, and you're a bass player, and you're a lead player, but you're also a harmonist. And so I think it's cool to hear you talk about that in a way where you can adapt as you go, and you can fill in the spaces that are there for you. And if no one's being the drummer, then you can be the drummer, and if there's a drummer, then you can be the ad-lib, or you can be someone who fights the drummer, and all that stuff. And I'm interested how conscious your kind of experience of music is as a band member with the kind of rhythmic interplay between guitar, bass, and drums, because I guess for a lot of people, a lot of musicians, and also a lot of listeners to music that's based in the rhythm section, that interplay is interesting and it's really formative. And I guess my question to you is how conscious is that for you? If say bass player is right on the back of the drummer, do you think, okay, I'm gonna split the difference, I'm gonna go in the middle? Or do you think I'm gonna go where the bass player is, or I'm gonna go where the drummer is, I'm gonna fight both of them and go behind everyone? Or are these things you think about fully consciously, or are they things that you sometimes think about consciously and other times you just let yourself go? Or is it really much more intuitive for you?
I think it depends on what the parts are that the bass player is playing and what I'm playing. So if the simple answer would be, I'm going to follow the bass player if what my role is more similar to the bass player. So that way we feel like violin 1 and violin 2 in the orchestra, and the brass section's doing their thing, but we're the strings. So sometimes I'll think of that. But if my part as if the violins are doing one thing and the cello part is actually more like the low brass, well, then it makes more sense for the low brass to lock with the cello. I kind of think in those terms a lot of times, even just as a rhythm section player. So if my part is I'm definitely going to go more with the drummer. But if my part is boom, doom, 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 boom, doom, 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 kind of locking with the bass, I'm going to want to feel where, I just want it to line up right with the bass. So that way we're in this thing together, right in the lane driving next to the drummer. But if I have a role that's a little more like bongos or tambourine, because sometimes I think of my guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or even tank 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 tank.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If I'm in that realm, I can kind of float between the two, but I am listening more for the strong beats, because I want the strong beats to lock. Sometimes, I maybe you can speak into this, because I know that your awareness of swing percentage and your awareness of subdivision and where the gravity is either on the downbeat or the E16th. Sometimes you hear people trying to do the Chris Dave, Nate Smith, Questlove, Pino thing, where there's like one person's on, one person's behind. And sometimes, you have the college version where it's like, I get what you're trying to do, but now you're all just dragging. Like
It doesn't work. Right,
yeah. So
right.
Because you've analyzed so much of that, and your awareness of that and your consciousness of that is so high, what do you think makes that work and not work? Like when does it work and when doesn't it?
So you listen to a band like, D with Questlove and Pino, right? And you think, what makes that the kind of holy grail for being on the back of the beat, but it not falling behind? I think it needs to come from your humanity. It needs to come from who you are. Questlove's not going to slow down. He's content being exactly where he is in time. He's not going to listen to Pino and think, oh, okay, I'll pander to that, or whatever. I don't think Pino's thinking that. Intuition, I think, comes from who they are as people, and it's you can analyze it to a point in post, and you think, oh, Pino's exactly whatever it is, 4/10 of a beat behind.
Yeah.
But those guys aren't thinking in that way. They're interacting. It's as you say, the interplay between the different ingredients in every band is going to be slightly different. And so I find bands most satisfying to listen to in terms of time and otherwise when someone's being themselves in the band. And I know that kind of sounds abstract, but some drummers play sloppy, and that's what makes them amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know this band called De Hoof?
I don't.
Oh man, it's so killing. They're a San Francisco-based group, and they have this incredible singer who seems really deadpan.
Okay.
But then you've got this energy, this kind of distorted energy, this organized chaos energy with the drums and the bass and the guitar, and they often do phrases in 6/4 phrases, and these funny kind of like and the odd things, things you don't hear that much. And Greg, the drummer, is kind of a genius, and he'll speed up or slow down the band, and you can feel him as a person, like speeding up and slowing down his excitement levels throughout the track. So it'll be like, and the band somehow has evolved to like follow that really beautifully and really closely. But you can hear like their friendship, you can hear their interaction, you can hear the impatience of one thing push the other thing to a place and then put the other person pulling them back, and vice versa. I feel like you can hear this in Miles too. Miles' classic quintets and stuff. You can hear, Tony rushing and pushing and thinking like, I don't like this, or I like this, and then Herbie being real patient. With Tony or whatever. You can hear the pushing and pulling of the people in the band. To me, that is really hard to detect in the era that is led by technology, because it's so tempting to say, okay, quantize, or okay, I'll auto-tune, I'll round it, round everything to the nearest beat or semitone or whatever it happens to be. And I think that there's a real uniqueness that happens when people play live. And this is something I really hear within the Vulf guys, you included obviously, is being able to lock into something that feels like real life rather than feeling like click track or feeling like it's really, really locked in. It feels like it's happening before your eyes and before your ears. And I think when people do that and they interact with each other in that way rhythmically, you can feel the difference massively. And so a lot of the kind of college version of Dilla's slug groove or whatever, it comes when there's a click track turned on, and it's like, and it's this funny thing where it's like, okay, well, all I hear him doing is dragging the hi-hat behind, and so that's what I'm going to do. But it doesn't work like that. I actually have an interesting example, Dilla.
Yeah.
This is not people playing together. This is someone who sat down and consciously kind of put this together.
Yeah.
Like it's a conscious choice. And like the tambourine is right on the back of the beat, right? You hear the tambourine going, and then you got the kick drummers in front of the beat going boom, 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 boom. Like that. And then the snare to me is right in the middle. It's just so interesting. So I think some of the best grooves are things where things are fighting each other, And one of the most common kind of misunderstandings that I tend to hear when I hear people try and be sluggy is that everyone's slugging in the same direction at the same time.
Yeah.
So you'll have the hi-hat going and the bass was going dum 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 dum, and the keyboards and it's like that's not that's the kind of mismajesty of it, if you like, because what makes it cool is that one person does one thing in one direction and then the other person does something in a different direction. So it might be the bass player's going right on the back, but then you've got hi-hat right on the very front.
Yeah.
You know, and that is really exciting. And sometimes the snare is early and sometimes the hi-hat is late. That's another misunderstanding I think people sometimes get wrong, is that is different from
Yeah.
you know. And I think honestly, I think a lot of these decisions are kind of unconscious, but they come from someone's personality and how much Pino is able to pull on the back of the beat to Quest's consistency or inconsistency at times too. It kind of depends on how he's feeling on that day, you know, and all those dynamics, they can't be theorized. Like you can't sit and think, oh, this is exactly why this is killing. And it's that thing. Oh, there's a great quote that it's about humor, and it's about frogs, and it's a quote by basically, yeah, the quote is by this amazing guy, E.B. White. I don't know if this is the exact quote. It says, yeah, look, it's like, what happens when you dissect humor? Here we go. Humor can be dissected as a frog can, but the thing dies in the process. That's the idea. I can't find the actual quote. But it's like, yeah, you can take it apart. You can say, oh, this is why it works. Oh, the hi-hat's late. Oh, the bass is late. Or the kick's early. Or the vocals are whatever. But that's not what makes it magical. I think what makes it magical is the person behind it, you know. And if you listen to someone like Jay Dilla, his kind of sensibility, it's so Jay Dilla, you know. But it can be really inconsistent.
Yeah.
And so I think that's partly what makes it great is the human inconsistencies that arise when either you're sitting down and you're conceiving something that is imperfect and you're not striving to be perfect, or you're playing with musicians where inevitably it won't be perfect, and how much you choose to roll with that kind of dictates who you are in some ways.
That's something that I've learned a lot with playing more in Vulfpeck. You know, Jack doesn't want to edit anything, and sometimes he'll pick a take where I'm like, "Oh, come on, man, just let me punch in the bridge." He's like, "No."
Yeah, right.
All right, fine, whatever. It's good. And then in the end, maybe I'm one of 4 people in the world that cares.
That's the thing, isn't it?
And it's just like, it would take away from it if everybody said, all right, let me just punch this, or let me edit this, let me blah, blah, blah. I didn't get the right cutoff. It's like,
the vibe is gone. Yeah, totally.
I want to talk about, you have Jesse volumes 1, 2, and 3 out, and they each have a different sound. And Jesse 3 to me is really fun because you kind of did a little more of a funky approach, a little more of a funk thing, but the sound of them is very different. What I noticed is, what I love the most about volume 3 is that the way you placed the music, it's so upfront in your face. The way that I like my funk thing is like right on my, when I tell people like, oh yeah, I want it to be in your face, like, all right, I'm just going to put a little room on it. I'm like, no. Like,
no.
Do negative room. Like, do the transient designer where you take out every, like,
I do that all the time. Yeah.
Where it's like, I like my stuff to be so far in your face. It's like you wouldn't even recognize the Mona Lisa if you were looking at it. You're standing that close. And I think some of your Jesse Volume 3 has a similar thing where it feels like it's just so right here. And
it's so close.
I love that sound.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it was always the one I was most excited about sonically, because it was the first time I wasn't trying to adhere to being in a space, you know. So the idea with Jesse was, you know, you got these 4 volumes, volume 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're each a different like physical space. I think you've really picked up on this well, but basically volume 1 is a colossal big acoustic space, right? Orchestra. So you got this expansive kind of ravaging hall, like the dawn.
Yeah.
Everything's light, everything's coming out. It's full, it's huge, it's incandescent, you know. Volume 2 is acoustic still, but it's a smaller space. So I guess more based on folk music and things that feel slightly smaller, closer together, and it's cozier. But it feels like you're in, you know, you're in a room to a point. It feels like it's, you know, it's happening before your eyes, but it's no longer cavernous. It's much more kind of in your hand, handmade. Volume 3 was always going to be the kind of negative space album, and that's exciting because I'm no longer thinking, where in the room do I want to place these sounds? I'm thinking like, where in the mind do I want to place these sounds?
Yeah.
And that gets exciting, you know, because then it's like, whoa, I can put this, as you say, so close, you don't even know what it is because it's so close, and around you as well. And
yeah.
I got really into binaural mixing on this record too. So you got, you know, things that go beyond stereo, you know, things that are, you know, 64 plus panned. So, you know, and that's just a crazy axis to think about. And, you know, I spent a lot of the last 10 years examining lots of different axes of music. You've got the harmonic axis and that all that gravity. You've got the rhythmic axis, as we've been talking about, with how delayed things are, how swung things are, all this stuff. And I've got my own sort of weird approach to all that stuff. But the axis of sound is, honestly, I think it's one that people don't think actively enough about, especially in 21st century and in education as well. I think people aren't taught about how much power there is when you put sonics in the hands of musicians, because musicians play music, right? And that's what they're taught to do. So, all right, I'll master my instrument, I'll go on stage, I'll play my instrument, and that feels good. But recording music is a completely different art form, and like how the thing feels is so potent. And I think, you can have so much control over someone's experience now in how something feels sonically. So with Volume 3, I've got to say I was so grateful for this bonus 5 months I was sort of gifted out of thin air because of the pandemic, because I was going to go on tour in March and the album was basically in the bag, or I thought it was in the bag, and my tour got cancelled about 4 days before we embarked on the trip. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm not going to finish this album, I'm going to give it a little bit more time. And so what that time enabled me to do was to really mix it, like actually really mix it, not just record it and leave it there as I recorded it. And I think there's something to be said for the sort of unconscious placement of sound. I tend to record a lot of my sounds in this room just because I know it so well. The distance away from the mic that I consider it to be loud, without doing too much post automation. It's like, if I want it to be quiet, I'll go stand on the other side of the room. If I want it to be close, I'll eat the microphone, as it were. And that's cool. For the acoustic albums, I try to keep it a bit like that. I mean, with an orchestra, there's really not that much you can do with space anyway, because you've got the sound of the room. But with Volume 3, it was this circus. I got to really play with like just movement and taking away space, giving something space, and opening out the stereo. You think, oh, chorus time, I'm going to add a kick that has more low end. A lot of pop producers do that. They'll save under 40 hertz for the chorus, and when the chorus hits, it's like boom. Oh man, I feel that. Or it's like, same is true with high end, or drummer plays with the bell of the ride cymbal in the chorus, because it's like, whoa, we're expanding, everything's great. For me, it's like, what I didn't realize in production, you can go 20% wider in the chorus. And that's fascinating. If you've been pretty mono, or mono with a little bit of stereo until the chorus, and then the stereo gets wider in the chorus, it's fascinating stuff. And I've also got really into mid-side compression, which I'd never really got with before. But mid-side compression being, the louder the sound is, the wider the sound is, or vice versa. The louder the sound is, the more mono the sound is. And so you get these, these capacities for sounds breathing, where if it's like, and on the da, it's like, it's wide, and then otherwise it goes in. And if you put just like a tiny bit of that on the master bus, in, say, I like to use Ozone. I use Ozone 9 right now a lot. And if you put a little bit of that on the master in like the vintage compressor mode, it really helps it breathe, and it stops it feeling digital. And I think one of the brilliant things about the age we're living in now is that you can be musical in ways that, honestly, backtrack 20 years, they weren't possible. You couldn't get things to breathe adaptively with volume in conjunction with stereo width, but now you can do that. And so I think it's fun to play with those, play with those axes, and then obviously try not to overthink them too much when you're actually in the music making process.
I think that's really great. I'm going to try that. My thing that I've been using lately is the mono below 100 hertz or whatever. Sometimes I'll do that. Mm-hmm. There's a good hertz plugin where I do that, and it just kind of tightens up the low. Just as kind of a quick master bus, throw it on.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I often forget that, because you don't need it to be stereo under 100 hertz. Why would you need it to be like one thing's on the left, one thing's on the right, unless it's like a crazy panning escapade or something?
Yeah.
I'm with you, man. Like that's a good one. I should write that down, I think.
Yeah, I use the good hertz. I think it's just mid-side is the name of the plugin. I mean, there's a lot of plugins that do it, but I use the good hertz one.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and it's crazy with mid-side, because you can say, okay, I'm gonna make something wider as it gets louder, but only between 2 and 4K.
Yeah.
And then it's like a certain bit of it starts breathing. It's like, whoa, I didn't realize there was this.
That's cool.
This aspect of the sound. It's crazy. And honestly, I've learned so much in the past year, just sort of getting us into these sounds with this volume with Volume 3 as possible. And it makes me listen back to older things I've made and be like, man, I wish I'd known about X, Y, Z when I did this. Do
you feel like you'll ever, because you clearly are a very good producer. Do you feel like you're going to produce for other people, or are you just continuing to make your own thing?
I don't know, man. I don't know where I'll be led. But one thing I'll say, and I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but I'm really I'm really liberated working on things that aren't me.
Yeah.
Because when I'm working on something that's for me, for Jacob Collier, I've got my own preconceptions about what the hell that means, and I've got my idea about what other people think that means, and then I've got the things I don't like about it and the things I love about it and things I want to change, things I want to do more of. But when I work with someone else or for somebody else for their thing, all that stuff goes out the window, and it's like, okay, let's just make some music, like what feels good now, today. And that renders my skills, I think, with far less ego. It's like you can park that whole side of things and just be like, all right, I'm a painter, here's a canvas, what do you want to make? And somehow there's a revelation that comes from that. And I think doing something for yourself is really important. I think it's facing up to who you are and what you stand for and your aesthetics. Like, that's a huge part of being a musician and an artist. But I think every now and then I'm reminded of the kind of freedom that comes from not having to do something for yourself, or even not having to do something for a reason. I've got into this thing recently where I've been doing this sort of like ideas relay with a friend of mine, and we had a conversation where we were talking about just sort of getting blocked creatively, especially once. I've released 4 albums right at this point, and that's so much music, and I feel like there's all these ideas I've got of who I am and all that stuff, and so now starting something is actually difficult because it's like I have to get myself into a situation where I'm just making it and I'm not thinking, how does this fit into this quadruple album puzzle or into this great big plan, whatever. And so what I've been doing with this friend of mine is spending half an hour putting something down, sending it to him. He spends half an hour, sends it back to me. I spend half an hour, but send it back to him. And it's weird, but it's fascinating, and it's beautiful because it brings things out of you that you would never expect. And so I would imagine at some point, wanting to sort of endorse that process more, and working with others in these kind of untethered scenarios and unexpected ways. But honestly, I don't know what the next few years are going to bring at all. And I think it's important that I don't make too many solid plans, in the sense that, I know I want to be this or travel here or work with this exact person. I think it's a nice predicament to leave all these things unknown, but to leave as many doors open as possible.
All right, this is some good conversation. I got to remind you, though, have you guys not gone to that Neural DSP website yet? You got to go check it out. Use that 30% off coupon, Wong. That's my last name. And while you're there, check out the Archetype Cory Wong plugin. I guarantee you, if you are looking for good, clean, or edge of breakup tones, this is the plugin for you. There's 3 different amps, a pedal board, EQ, 3 different cabs. Come on! You can use it live. You can use it in the studio. There's that 14-day free trial. Check out all the plugins and let me know which one's your favorite.
Do you feel like you found your thing with this 4-volume series, or do you feel like you're still discovering it and this series is part of that?
I would say the latter. I would say that almost one of the reasons I did this project is so that when I finished the project, I could get started on my career. Because, I wanted to give all of my different tastes, like every facet of music I've ever loved or enjoyed, I wanted to give it a shot. Whether it's Gnawa music from the streets of Morocco, or Malian music with Umu Sangari, this incredible African singer, or Leanne Lahavas, the softly silken R&B thing, or Ty Dolla $ign, the kind of the epic transcendent kind of like auto-tune pop vocal thing, or Kimbra, who we were talking about earlier on, or all these different people. These are worlds, these are rooms in my imagination. I wanted to go in there and spend time with them and sort of plant all these seeds. I want to plant every possible seed, so that after Volume 4 comes out, I mean, honestly, I don't know how it's going to feel, but I think the fun thing is going to be like, so now what do I want to do? Now I've kind of ascertained the basics for the world of music. Like, what on earth do I want to do now? And I think that's a question I won't know the answer to until I'm out of the woods on this thing.
I think that's really exciting. And as a fan of your music, I'm excited to see where that grows. That's going to be really fun.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Cheers.
That Volume 1 you did, the orchestra was Metropole Orchestre. You and I
Metropole Orchestre.
Yeah, I did a album with them, and I did a run of shows with them. It was incredible. They're so fun to work with.
I completely agree. I mean, the record you did now is coming back to me. It's just so killing. What I love about that orchestra particularly is, and I don't know if you found this, but they can straddle so effortlessly these different spaces, right? They can do the epic classical thing. They can do the jazz thing, or the pop thing, or the dance thing, or the pocket thing. There's so many different ways that they're comfortable with making music. Yeah, how did it feel to you to sit on top of that as a conglomerate of musicians and just play?
My approach was going to either be, all right, I'm going into this thing, head down, I want you guys to play the music like I do it and like my band does it. Or all right, let's take a look at what you guys do best and how can we showcase that within my music and let me showcase the way that I play along with you guys. And that was really fun because what it did is it created more of a collaborative environment where they sounded very much like them, but my music was brought to a whole new level and a whole new life. Some of my music somehow just inherently sounds kind of like TV music for whatever reason.
Interesting.
And
it definitely has that kind of cinematic axis where it scales to this like broad, you see mountains, you see road, railways, and all. I love that. I love that aspect of what you do. It's visual.
Yeah. And that's where I get a lot of my inspiration for things too. So it was fun to be able to bring that to life in a completely different way, especially with that many people and those kind of instruments where it's like, okay, this is the synthesizer part, but the brass are playing it. And the brass can enhance different things. And, it's not 5 fingers playing this part. It's 8 different people or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to just experience that.
It's amazing. This is a question I've been asking myself recently, but do you think there's a danger in being responsible for extracting somebody's strength for them in collaboration?
I think part of collaboration, why we would pick the people we collaborate with, is there's something about them that sparks a creative interest or a certain response that we want to bring out in our own music, at least for me. So like when I'm working with Joe Satriani, my idea of what he brings to the table, I'm going to leave the spaces for that, but I'm going to let him interpret how to fill those spaces. So here's my interpretation of how you would play a lead guitar thing in this. And then he comes in and he doesn't have any like, I want you to do this exact thing. He just can paint the way that he wants to paint on the part of the canvas that I've left for him, but that we've also kind of agreed on the thing. Or like
totally
working with Kimbra, I had basically a rhythm section track done and was like, hey, I think this would be, what's your vibe? What are you feeling on this? I love the way you produce, the way you write. And she just sent a voice memo back, kind of riffing nonsense over it just for melodic and phrasing ideas. And
I love it when she does that.
Yeah, and then it was just back and forth, and then it's like, the chorus feels like it needs to go to a different place. It's like, okay, scratch what's on the chorus, let's add this thing in. Oh, yeah, this. Is this too cheesy? No. Actually, it fits exactly right if I do this melody,
Yeah.
I think for me, when I'm working with collaborators or looking for collaborators, it's a different perspective, or it's something where, or if I'm asked to collaborate with somebody, I normally I have a pretty good idea of what they know me for or what they'd be looking for from me. And unless they say something very specific, I'll interpret their reason for bringing me in and go from there. Like a lot of artists will have a guitar player. Why didn't they use their guitar player? And why did they bring me in? Okay, what do they think? What do they want me to be able to add to their song to be able to enhance it?
And so how do you avoid kind of self-caricaturizing in the sense that if you operate in that way where you're doing the thing that people know you for enough times in your career for you to kind of propel it forwards, how do you stop being an endless recycling of your own vocabulary? Because this is something that I think about and I think is interesting, and it's a struggle sometimes too.
Yeah.
Like, what are your solutions for, I guess, not being a kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, as it were?
Well, I feel like I've spent a lot of time developing my caricature.
Yeah.
And I think even within Vulfpeck, we are kind of like this cartoon where I'm the striped shirt guy and rhythmic strat guy, and Theo's the guy that wears tank tops and he's all over and he's like moving from every other instrument. And Joe Dart's cool, calm, collected, head bob, wearing all navy blue and got the sunglasses on. Woody's the guy who does bird watching and writes really interesting harmonic and melodic things. And, I think everybody in the band has a caricature to a certain extent that we've, I guess, inadvertently created for ourselves.
Founded, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but that is a good question. I think for me, part of what I've tried to do is showcase the depth of my musicality beyond just guitar, beyond just writing, beyond just being a producer. My role in Vulfpeck is different than my role in the Fearless Flyers, which is also different than my role in Cory Wong, the artist.
Yeah, different nuances for sure. Yeah.
And then within my own Cory Wong thing, kind of like you're doing with your music, I'm exploring different spaces in front of my audience. So whether it mean doing kind of like a new agey, meditative, contemplative album with John Batiste. That's going to showcase a different thing. Whether it be an acoustic album that's kind of campfire with a string section, I want to be able to do that. So at least there's something to point to that shows that I'm not one-dimensional.
Exists within that sphere. Yeah, no, totally. I think you're doing a tremendous job at that too, and it's something I'm almost obsessive about, not becoming a caricature within styles or within my own thing. It's like I have these sort of creative. I put down specific kind of I suppose you could call them inverters, like choice inverters in a process where it's like, what would I not do here? What would Jacob Collier not do next? Well, let's do that.
Yeah.
And let's see where that leads me. And I do that a lot, and I think sometimes it's rubbish, like so bad. And sometimes I end up falling into things that I think, oh, I would do that, I would do whatever. But I think the thing I'm finding, which is really interesting, is no matter how many times you invert your choices or, avoid the thing you've done before, because I think a lot of musicians grow in this way. You think, okay, well, I've done this before. How would I do it differently next time? Or I've told this joke before. How can I tell this joke in a slightly new way the next time I tell it? This is how language evolves. This is how stories evolve, and from generations to generation. But I think the interesting thing is that your DNA, the Cory Wong DNA or the Jacob Collier DNA, like these are so distinctive no matter what you do, because it's who you are. And so if you're playing acoustic, if you're playing electric, if you're playing rhythm, if you're playing melodic, if you're arranging for orchestra, if you're singing, whatever, you know what I mean? It's like there's a part of you that only you can do. And I often think of being an artist is stepping up to the responsibility of the fact that you are the only person in the universe who can do what you do the way you do it.
Yes.
And so I find stretching that really interesting, because I think at first I was afraid, what if I lose my sound? If I start doing electronic production, well, I'm the a cappella guy, or I'm the sort of arranger guy, or I'm the singer piano player guy, or I'm the whatever happens to be, jazz head or pop head or classic, whatever. And it's like all these things, they're all temporary, and it's important to place stepping stones for yourself. But I can specifically remember, I guess almost to go back to the beginning of the conversation, having done those a cappella arrangements, thinking, well, all right, like I've sort of done that. I've sort of done that now. Like I've reharmonized jazz standards to oblivion, like check,
Yeah.
and now what else can I do that I will be interested in and that will pull me into my process? Because I think as I say, I'm almost obsessive about growing out of my own space. And the funny thing now is that if someone rolled their eyes, as many people do, I'm sure, and say, oh, that's so Jacob Collier, the thing that will be at this point in my life is not doing any one thing, is doing everything. It's like it's being X and Y and Z all at the same time. And so that was kind of the point of this era. The point of Jesse was to embrace just how this musical language is so universal and so broad. And yeah, there are similarities between Gnawa or samba and these musics of the world, which are wonky rhythmically, and Dilla and Quest and whatever, because there are things in common with the way they feel. And I love drawing parallels, and I love building bridges between all these different tastes in my world. That brings me a lot of joy. But I almost think the only way after Jesse to non-caricaturize myself is going to be to do one thing and one thing only, like a record of just piano or just piano and vocals or whatever. And I'm really excited for that. I'm excited to scale the thing down and to see what comes out when I'm not stretching everything into infinity, which I suppose has been my solution to the not to do one thing problem. But boy, have I learned a lot about myself in the process,
That's really fun to hear. That's awesome to hear, because I love that you are just so transparent with your journey in this thing. For me, watching my favorite artists and the artists that I think are game changers, you see that transparency. You see the change of them in their journey. And that's something I'm trying to emulate, like you're saying as well. Like, I feel like I'm right in the middle of the time, and you might feel like it at the same time, the way that you're talking about, like, give me the Cory Wong thing on this track. It's like, okay, people say that to me, and I know what they mean. And they say that to other guitar players. And those guitar players will know what that means. And that's fine, and that's cool. Or if somebody says, give me the Jacob Collier thing on this. It's like, okay, stacked harmonies, a lot of, this sort of different thing. Okay, but it's not just stacked harmony. It's different than Beach Boys, because it's, there's different clusters inside, and then there might be some other stuff happening. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I think it's going to be fun to see what that is for any of us that have that thing now. In the same way,
I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, in the same way that, to transition here a little bit, might be like defining what the Quincy Jones thing is.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
having different eras and there being so many different parts of his depth musically. So that's really fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, the Quincy thing is a really good case study for this because, he's at a point in his life, well, he's been at this point in his life for 50 years, but like you can point to each decade of his career and be like, oh, that was a sound. Oh, that was a thing. And that to me is super, super interesting because, you have a musician who started as an arranger and then segued into band leader and conductor and then segued into producer and then you had kind of like humanitarian for a little bit with the real world thing, and then hip hop meets jazz. He opened the doors for that. Halfway through his career, you've got the kind of like, you've got people pointing at his career as a legacy which is complete, and saying, oh, wow, it's amazing what you've done at age 50, at age 60. But like he was 50 years old and he hadn't even started Thriller. Gosh. I think to me, that's crazy to think about. Like someone with that capacious and courageous a kind of sentiment towards life and music that he perpetually would reimagine himself and not be worried about losing people, along the way. And, even if you look at someone like Stravinsky, you got these three eras of Stravinsky. You've got the kind of the big Russian thing at the beginning where he was doing this crazy experimental work and stuff. And then you've got the stuff towards the end of his career, which is kind of neoclassical, which is taking things from like 400 years prior, but inventing them and twisting them in a way that only he could. And then it's sandwiched between those two. You've got already like a completely different set of musical languages too, entering into the kind of semi-serialist stuff. And I just find someone like that is so interesting. And I would also say Sting is a good example of this too. I love Sting, man. Like Sting's one of my childhood heroes. But you look at the Police era, and then you look at the sort of the Soul Cages and 10 Summoners Tales, and then you look at Brand New Day and Sacred Love, and then you look at the Lute songs, and you look at the musical that he wrote, and it's like, wow, that guy's he's willing to stick his neck out and do something that people are going to be like, what the hell? I thought you were the guy who wrote Roxanne, can you just do that again? And it's like he's courageous enough to say, you know what, you think the Sting thing is X, but the Sting thing is changing all the time. And what I hope for audiences in the 21st century is that audiences will get peaceful with realizing that you can be 10,000 different things as a human being, or as an artist, or as an audience member, or as a family member, or as someone in a relationship, or teacher, or student, or whatever. And having that change and being peaceful with that changing is amazing. And I think it could be a real revelation and a relief for artists to not feel like they have to do their thing all the time. Yeah. And I know so many artists who struggle with this, and that's one of the reasons why I asked you that question, because in some ways, all young musicians want is for people to be able to say, hey, can you do the blah, blah, blah thing? And for people to be like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. If someone said to me, can you do Cory Wong on this track? It's like, I know exactly what they're talking about, because that is killing. And you defined that. But the question is, how do you scale a concept as vivid and iconic as that into something which has many facets?
That's such a good question. I guess my other approach to answering that question would be that for me, and I'm curious, I'm going to tell you my answer to my different approach to this answer and see if you have a similar thing. But when I make music, when I make art in general, my guiding light is not, look what I can do. My guiding light is bringing joy and fun to the listener or to whoever's there in the room. When people come to my shows, if they leave thinking, wow, that guy's amazing at guitar, whatever, that's fine, that's fun, okay, cool. Yeah. But the main thing that I want them to do is leave the show thinking, oh my gosh, that was so much fun, that was so joyful. And I think that guiding principle is something that is obviously not tied to music. It's not tied to an instrument. It's not tied to harmonizing a pentatonic scale using pizzicato style picking with palm muting, or it's not the Prince Nile Rodgers guitar thing, whatever. It's so far bigger. The vision is so much bigger than anything like that, that if I use that as my guiding light, that can be something that can inspire me through the rest of my life. Is there something like that for you?
I love that answer. So it's an interesting question. For me, what I've realized is the best service I can do I can give to a room is to be true to my energy at that time. And so, in general, I'd say I'm pretty joyous as a human. I'm quite joyous. I'm quite energetic. I'm quite excitable and in general quite optimistic about the world in general, even though that sounds quite like a weird thing to say in 2020. But I think the world's freaking awesome. And so that to one side, I'll be on tour and there'll be days where I'm longing to be home. You know, I'm exhausted. All I'm yearning for is a bit of silence, a bit of peace and quiet. Or there are days where I feel like I haven't been understood that day, or I haven't been heard that day. You know, or days where I feel like I've got too much potential. I don't know if you ever feel like this, but there are times where I walk on stage and I've just got too much creative potential to be reasonable. I'm too reactive. I'm way too reactive. It's like I've just got this pressure cooker thing where if you give me anything, I will have infinite ideas directed at that thing, and I can't contain it. And other days where I can't think of anything to play. I've got no ideas. I can't tune into those those natural upper rungs of the ladder where it's like I can feel my way out of this. I can't do that. And so at first when I toured, because I haven't been touring for that long, I've been touring for 4 years or something, having never done gigs before that, and I've probably done about 400 gigs or whatever, and the difference between the first gig and the last gig I did, which weirdly now is about a year ago, it's really strange to think about that. It's crazy because I think I started playing thinking, okay, so the role of the performer is to turn on the light. Yeah, gig, audience, happy, wow. And so you park whatever you're going through on one side and you turn it on and everything's good. And to a point, I think that is part of the job. You know, part of the job is like, you know, I might be having an awful day. I might be having a great day. I might be in love. I might have just gone through a breakup. No matter what I'm going through, I'm going to put on a good show for you. But I think that when I go on stage and I can, you know, I like the verb alchemize, but when I can alchemize where I am, who I am on that day, and I can bring that to a room, I always feel, and maybe this is just me projecting, you know, but I always feel like there's a connection that's made in that room that can't be made any other way. And so there might be days where I'm not feeling joyful, despite being a joyful person in general. And if I try to be joyful at that moment, man, it doesn't work for some reason. For me, I'm not good at being genuine. And if I'm able to be sorrowful in that moment, genuinely, then my essence of being joyful kind of shines through, I think, more effectively than pretending to be joyful. And that, not for a moment am I saying this is what you would do, but to me, I had to go through a process of realizing that performing is not about pretending. Performing is about being honest and being who you are at that moment. And that can be really tricky, especially if my mood is, I don't want to communicate with anyone. I don't want to make any eye contact with anyone. I just want to be on my own. I don't want to turn any lights on. I want to turn all the lights off. So it's like, instead of coming on stage and thinking, lights are on anyway, you know, it's like, it's thinking, okay, how can I show you that this is my space and how can you be welcome in it nonetheless? And then I think, then you open the doors to being fearless and saying, I'm prepared to put myself on the line. I'm prepared to take a risk. And I think, I guess to go back and answer the question, if there's something I would hope people feel leaving a gig of mine, it would be that they too can be themselves and they too can be fearless to be who they are at that moment, which changes all the time. You know, they too can let it out. You know, let out what it means to be them and articulate it for people, because I don't know, for me that's what keeps me alive, man. Like articulating how I feel in some way, expressing it, you know, putting it on a canvas, putting it into words, putting it into music, putting it into a room. That's so important to me. And so I think that hopefully what would come across at a gig of mine is people being like, you know what, you know, I love, whether or not I loved that music or I didn't get that music or I'm, you know, whatever, I was riled by it. I hated it. You know, I want to imitate it. I want to, whatever. He was so Jacob on that gig, and I respect that. And I hope that there's some courage that through osmosis, that people would feel like they can be themselves and that it's okay to be themselves, even if that's really mucky or weird or dark or strange or joyous or, you know, whatever. I think for me that's what drives me forwards all the time. And so, you know, I would share your joyful sentiments in general, because I think that when I'm myself, the kind of the average mood is pretty upbeat, and I think that that's what transmits. But, you know, I find it dangerous to say to myself, just personally, like, I'm this kind of guy, you know, or I operate within these kinds of terms, or I always tend to blah, blah, because I feel like that makes me smaller to a point, even though it's difficult because you have to define yourself sometimes. But I feel like saying, I don't know who I am today, but I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to be damn well Jacob Collier today. That to me feels, first of all, I think authentic. And second of all, it's actually, it's more sustainable.
That's an incredible answer. And very respectful for your audience as well, and inspiring for other musicians. I think you and I probably both have a high percentage of musicians as our fan base.
I think so too. Yeah.
But that's
yeah,
fun. It's cool.
I love it, man. It's like when you're, how can I put this? If you're telling I don't know why I always use humor as analogies. I'm realizing this in the conversation, but if you tell a joke to someone about something that they know, then it's going to be funnier than if you tell someone a joke about something that they don't know, even if it was funny. Yeah. Nonetheless, and so playing live is not a joke, and that's not really what I'm saying. But I do think that if there's a common vocabulary in the room on some level, even like a common emotional vocabulary, which I think increasingly is the case for me. It's like we're all in this room because we can share these feelings together rather than we can share this knowledge together. But knowledge too. If you come into a room with a set of understandings, then that is really wonderful, because it means I don't have to start from zero when I'm expressing myself.
Yeah,
I can express myself starting from level 5 or level 6 for some people in the room, and you'll understand what I'm getting at when I don't play a note, when I don't play a chord, because you know what chord I would have played had I done the thing that was expected. And so one thing I love to do live and not non-live is just to carefully defy expectation. I do this with reharming all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, reharm, crazy chord, but what if it wasn't the crazy chord you were expecting, if it's a different chord? Sometimes the most surprising you can be is just a triad.
Yeah.
But a triad from the opposite side of the spectrum of harmony. And so being unexpected is easy and easier and more powerful when people feel what the other choice would have been had you done it. But if you have a room filled with no one who's ever heard a note of music before, and you're on those levels, then it's just going to go over everybody's heads. And so the thing I love about my audience so much is way more than them all being musicians, it's that they all love and listen to music, I think, a lot. A lot of them are really well versed in what music is and what it means, and so if I play something that feels Princey, or something that feels like an English choral Christmas arrangement or something, or if I play something that feels real gospely, like it's got a bunch of extended diminished chords, or if we look into a pocket that feels deep in a particular way, or we lay back on the beat or whatever, there's a response in the room to people who love that music, and I think that is really energizing for me. Do you find the same thing? Like people respond to certain things you do, and it's like, I know that thing. Yes. That has a place in my heart.
Absolutely. I mean, whether it be a rhythmic thing, whether it be an arrangement thing, a harmonic thing, or just choice of how to shape the energy arc of the set.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really an interesting thing to see the way the audience responds, because I've played in a bunch of other pop bands and toured with other artists where it's more general public thing, and they respond differently than a muso crowd. And there's certain things where it's like, hit on one and then the bass, boom. The crowd, where a general public crowd is going to go nuts when the chorus comes. It's like neither one of them is wrong, but everybody in the
absolutely, room. Yeah, that's really well put. Even just like drummer puts a crash on 2.
Yeah,
it's like killing.
Yeah, but and even more so if you dropped out on the 4. Didn't hit the 1, came back in on the 2. It's like,
Yeah, I don't believe it. But I think that's because they know what that feels like. They know what that means. It's like, I can't believe you did the thing, and even, one level down from people who would be able to consciously enunciate, like, he did the thing where he didn't play the 1. Just being like, is like, I was expecting the drums to continue playing, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And so it makes you laugh. It makes you cry. All these things that you can affect people by leading them in one direction, then gradually letting that expectation dissolve or go, or changing it and then bringing them back to it at the end. All these things. I think the magic of music is that they can be conscious or unconscious, both from musician and from the audience perspective. And I don't think you need to be able to enunciate or articulate what it is that's going on for it to move you, even high-level musical stuff.
Yeah.
Even I'm playing a chord of E major and there's an F sharp on the top of the chord, and suddenly I'm playing an A flat sus, like an A flat sus 13, and there's an F sharp on the top, or G flat on the top of the chord, and just the feeling of that note, it's like it's so steadfast. It's like, man, can't believe that I was pulled from one sound to another sound, and I don't feel like I was alienated throughout the transition because the pivot was successful. I think a lot of those emotional devices, they are emotional devices. They're not theoretical devices where it's like, well, I know it works because the textbook said blah blah mode, blah blah info. Fuck it. It's amazing because it makes you feel something, and I think for me there's a real beauty in seeing that translate to audience members or listeners who don't know what the hell's going on, but they know something's going on and they feel it, and that's like it's almost like the sort of magic in the room at that time.
Yeah. One of the fun riddles like that I'm always trying to solve live for me is I set myself up or set the audience up for a big guitar solo, but then I just play like a rhythm guitar solo. And it's like there's this anticipation, and by the end of it, they realize they've been kind of bamboozled into listening to a rhythm guitar solo instead of like something shredding. But it's just different, and it's cool, and their attention was kept in a different way, and it was all about
honestly,
the groove.
Yeah, I honestly think that I'm not going to say single-handedly, but you've made a space for that to be possible for people. You've said, I'm not going to play a solo which goes, I'm just going to go, and people go nuts. I think it's really great that that you've done that. I mean, thank you for doing that. I think it's a relief, because it just takes someone to be willing to, as I say, sort of stick their neck out and say, I'm not going to do the thing that has always been done here. I can do something else. And this killing Prince guitar thing, well, now it fits in reggae, or now that Gnawa swing, that fits in rock and roll, that fits in hip hop. Now it's like, once someone's done it or made it possible, then it's possible for everybody. And I think that the anticipation building of the rhythm guitar thing at the solo point is killing for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons I think is because it's not immediately gratifying. It's not like high note, it's like building, and it means bass underneath can go and build, and the drums can come, and then when it releases, it's like, it's the same. It's same kind of releases if you're in a club and it's like you've been four on the flooring for a while, and suddenly it's like kick jumps out and it's like high pass on the mix. It's like, and once you've done that, everything falls back in place. It builds and builds and builds and builds. I think that's a really cool device, because it's funny how audiences can be really easy to please in that way. It's like, I'm going to take it away, I'm going to bring it back, and everyone's like goes nuts. But there's something really wonderful about that, and I think one of the joys of being a musician is like trying to achieve that feeling in like a ton of different ways. Because there's so many ways you could do that. Yeah, exactly.
Oddly enough, the place that I got it from, and I know you got to know this album, the place that I got the rhythm guitar thing and just like, let's sit in the groove for a while, the first time I got hip to that was part 2 of Keith Jarrett's Colne concert.
Oh yeah, oh man, that's crazy. That whole piece is masterpiece. So how did that? Can you describe how those devices are similar? Because I'm sure some listeners will be confused at that reference.
Well, he had this undercurrent going with his left hand, then
yeah, I remember.
So he's got the undercurrent, and you expect him to do all this Jarrett-y, reharm, interesting, taking it way out, and it just kind of bubbles in this undercurrent, and then his right hand starts to bring in a single note, major chord melody, hinting pentatonic. And just when you think it's just like he gives a little hint of something interesting harmonically, but then it just sits in this thing for a couple minutes, and then sits, and then sits, and then just repeats the phrase almost like a mantra. But the undercurrent, the groove of it is ever changing, and it's kind of moving around. It's a really cool thing to try to bring that sort of emotion to a rhythm guitar part.
Oh, totally, yeah. And obviously when he then breaks out of that harmonically or rhythmically or whatever, it's like, oh, whoa, relief. Yeah. Like energy is being created. And so I think it's cool. The moment you set something up, or you take something out, or you keep something the same, it changes the energy, and it means that you'll be able to break out of it in the same way. And I think there's a real magic and a real art about getting that right, taking stuff out at the right moment. Like let's axe the drums now, or let's bring the drums back in now, or let's go on the ride now, or let's turn on the distortion now. All these different ways in which you can build and release tension. I love all that stuff. It's crazy to think about it.
And I think that's fun because people can experiment. That the place that we're in the world right now, in this century, like you're talking about, being able to do everything at home. I can do a lot of stuff, but I do everything in Logic, and I can build this world around this riff, and I can try all these different things and see if I have a visceral reaction from what dropping out and coming back in on the 2 does for me. And then if I'm the one who programmed it to do that and it still did the thing for me, imagine what it's going to do for somebody who didn't see it coming.
Yeah, exactly. And imagine what it's going to do when you play it with real musicians in a room.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Cool. Well, man, this has been really fun. I think we're coming up on time here for people's attention span. The podcast attention span, but this has been super fun. I really appreciate you coming. Dude, we gotta get together and play. We have to play some music.
We absolutely must. I mean, it will most definitely happen at some point.
Yeah.
When traveling resumes. Where are you based in the world?
Minneapolis.
Oh, Minneapolis. Okay. Killer. Yeah. At some point we're going to get together and we're going to make some crazy music. I'm well excited for that.
All right, we'll get our 16th notes all lined up and everything. Just the right amount.
Just the right amount. I dig it. Thanks, Cory. Dude, thanks so much for having me on. This has been a super energizing and fun conversation. Thanks, man.
That's it. That's the interview. That was really fun. Wow. Brilliant musician. Check out all of his music because it's amazing. I am a huge fan of Jacob Collier, and I am so excited to see what the next 50 years holds for his musical brain, his collaborations, and the impact that he has on music and society as a whole. Because I really believe that he is going to become an ambassador for music in the world. That's it. We'll see you next week. Peace.